Robert, thank you so much for joining today. You are an entrepreneur, you're an adventurer, and you are a dog sledder. Like, you are sort of like an Alaskan Indiana Jones, I feel like. So, thanks for joining us. Can you talk about your story and how you came to this? But also, did I read correctly? You discovered dog sledding in Georgia?
Yes, sort of ancillary. Yes.
Okay.
So I'll jump right into it. Let's see here. I started college right out of high school. I was a military kid, so I was living in Portland, Oregon, and I thought for sure I wanted to be a veterinarian. And that quickly turned into, man, I don't want to spend my life in a vet office for the next 30 or 40 years. So I remember it was one Saturday afternoon. I literally showed up to the park with a business card, a leash, and a smile. And I started offering dog training services to, kind of the soccer mom type
Hmm. Yeah.
clients, right? Just people that were having their pet dogs that didn't know what to do with them. So that turned in from one thing to another. I jumped into doing some competition obedience with a Siberian. His name was Axel. This was in the
Hmm.
early 90s, and this was, the height of Guns N' Roses and rock and all of that. So that was his name when you're early 20s. That's how you do things. So I started training Axel in competition obedience, and I showed up to these competitions, and I was there with a bunch of grandmas, and I just did not fit in well, if you know what I mean. I was this
Hmm.
kind of grungy 20-year-old kid in college with a Siberian Husky that probably didn't fit the mold either. So at one of these shows, I met a fellow competitor who actually lived in Georgia. And she said, "Hey, I would love for you to come out and look at our puppies sometime." So I jumped in my little 280Z, drove all the way down from Oregon to the mountains of Georgia, pretty much nonstop, and showed up to her kennel. And it was something like I'd never seen before. And she says, "Would you like to go for a ride?" And I said, "Sure." So she hooked up her sled dogs to this old sit down cart, kind of like a go kart looking thing.
Hmm.
And we took off through the mountains, and I was hooked. I ended up taking two dogs home, Rooster and Reich. They were the foundation of my sled dog kennel back in 1994.
Hmm.
And here we are 31 years later, sitting in Alaska with 35 sled dogs. If this is on video, you'll probably see one of our 14-year-old dogs, Bodie, pacing back and forth in the background. But yeah, it's been one heck of a ride, and I am excited to talk about it today.
That's fantastic. And what was it about the kennel that you had never seen before?
Well, this was right before, this is kind of dating people, but this is right before a movie came out by Disney called Iron Will. And it was a
Hmm.
sled dog movie. Every dog musher out there, that is sort of their benchmark for getting involved in this sport and this lifestyle. So it was a few months before that. And I had never really paid attention to what dog sledding was, even though I had a sled dog with a Siberian. But when they hooked those guys up, and I just felt the power, and I felt the camaraderie of the team, and just everything about it. I mean, it was pure adrenaline, pure adventure in like a half an hour. I equated to my first skydiving jumps. It was something like I'll never forget.
Wow. And so you had Axel, you had two more puppies. Then what happened? You went back to, you were in Portland at the time?
Yes, and
So what happened from there?
so fate literally had it that my grandfather passed away the following summer, and he had a cabin up in northern Minnesota that really the family, at least the close family, didn't know much about. He built it in the early 60s, and they go up and do fishing and all that sort of stuff. I had never been there. But anyway, he left it to me in his will. And again, being a young college student, I had just getting ready to finish college. So I decided, maybe I'll really to see where this dog mushing thing takes off. So I packed up the U-Haul. I had my three Siberian Huskies and my stuff, and moved to Minnesota, kind of like the Beverly Hillbillies, if you will. And I started building up a sled dog kennel at that time. And I started racing in mid-distance races and that sort of thing, I guess, in 1996. And Yeah, we could talk about that forever. Met my wife in 1999 through sled dogs. We can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
And 2010, here we are in Alaska to chase that crazy Iditarod dream. And we might have some breaking news right here on your podcast if you so choose. I know that we are talking about fundraising and stuff off air.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to get to that. So you you had obedience work, like you had a skill set and expertise in that. How does that translate to mushing and building a team? Is that something that you had to seek out additional advice for, or how did you get comfortable with that and learn?
Well, I tell people all the time, even today, my dog training background, my experience as a professional dog trainer literally comes from living with a team of sled dogs.
Mm,
I can sit there on one of the dogs' houses and watch 35 dogs showing body language and behavior and quirks and, intricacies that most people never see. When if you're a dog trainer, you're seeing the dogs that you work with, your clients. You're seeing golden retrievers and Labradors and poodles and doodles and all of this sort of stuff. But I am seeing how dog behavior is interacting with each other. And one of the most common occurrences with pet dogs is they take their dog to the dog park and they don't know how to behave because they don't know how to interact among other dogs. So I think I bring a unique skill set, not only from that competition obedience background, but just kind of having the perfect quote unquote laboratory of dogs to look at and watch and learn from every day.
hmm. And do the dogs naturally interact with each other? Is there any training that has to happen there for competition?
Well, in dog mushing, there is not any real obedience training. Pretty
Okay.
much, you're picking these guys up. They're athletes. They're rocking and rolling. They're doing their thing. Training comes in. The training like you would do for a marathon, miles, and that sort of stuff, endurance.
Hmm.
Whereas regular obedience training, there's not a whole lot. These guys probably don't know how to sit down, stay very well, but they are fully focused there. But we do also train therapy dogs and service dogs, and we occasionally will use one of our dogs. There is a dog that flunked out as a sled dog that ended up becoming a service dog for a young man. I believe he's in Utah now. He is now a college age kid, so he's been
Hmm.
around for a long time, and he has one of our sled dog flunkies as a service dog, which is quite unusual, but a pretty cool story.
It's very cool. So you have raced all over North America. Do you have a race that you particularly enjoy or one that stands out as the most memorable for you?
Oh my goodness. I love dryland racing. Dryland racing is just that. You're hooking up your dogs to a bicycle, usually two dogs at a time or four dogs on a cart, and you're just racing through the woods, and it's exhilarating. It's more exhilarating than being on a sled. I've raced in a lot of uh, snow races, of course, and just racing in Alaska is awesome.
Mhm.
I remember one time in a race, I was asleep under my parka, had kind of covered up. I was sleeping out there with the dogs, and I lifted up my parka over my hood, and nobody else was out there. Everybody else was in the checkpoint, and I was the only one out there. And it was snowing, and they had the northern lights above me. And it was. I've been doing this a very long time. I have never seen that like that with a team of sled dogs in the middle of nowhere, snowing on a race. It was just one of the most magical things I have ever seen. And I, of course, came in last in that race, but hey, you know how it goes. So it
Yeah,
was awesome.
that sounds really magical. And how do the races work? Do you have to qualify to get into certain races? How does that circuit work?
So there are really three different types of dog mushing. There is sprint mushing, which is usually however many dogs you have on a team is the number of miles you run. So you have an 8 dog team, you run 8 miles, etc. Then they have mid-distance racing, which is typically anything from 50 to 300 miles. And then they have long distance racing, which is typically anything from 300 up to 1,000 miles, which is what the Iditarod is, which is what we'll talk about
Mhm.
in Alaska. To run the Iditarod, you have to qualify to run that, kind of like you would have to do for an Ironman or something
Hmm.
like that. You'd have to do these smaller races in order to be able to do that. So in order to qualify for that race, you have to do 700 to 750 miles, two 300-mile races, and either a 200 or a 150-mile race. And you have to do that as a qualifier. I mean, you have to do it unassisted and, have to do this report card thing and all of that sort of stuff. And then once you do that, then you're qualified to run in the bigger race.
Wow. Wow. And so your exciting news.
Yes, my exciting news. So I guess we could go back with the story in just a second, but we moved to Alaska in 2010 to chase this crazy Iditarod dream. For
Mhm.
folks that may not know what that is, it is a 1,000-mile race that it goes on every March. It's happening right now at the time of this recording, and it goes from Anchorage, Alaska to Nome. Think about just traveling the entire state of Alaska on a dog team. Think about a distance of about Denver, Colorado to Minneapolis, Minnesota on a map down in the lower 48. So a long way. So I am intending to qualify next year for that. It's been a long time coming. And if I do qualify, I will be able to run that in June of 27, excuse me, March of 2027. And I think this is the first time it's been announced publicly right here on this podcast.
That's so exciting. Thank you for sharing that with us. And this is such a dumb question, but I'm going to ask it. How do you prepare for that? Like, so we got to the qualifying part, but then now what do you do?
Oh, well, not only is it a tremendous amount of time, effort, and money, and if you did not have a team of sled dogs, like if I were to say, hey, I want to lease a team from, of Iditarod veteran or something like that, it would cost about $70,000 to do that,
Wow.
which
Wow.
is a lot of money
Yeah.
for one event. But yeah, it is a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of effort. Thankfully, my daughter, which is also part of the story, if you want to jump into it,
Yeah.
is going to be my handler. She works with us as a partner in our dog training school business,
Mhm.
whatever we call it. And she and I are going to dedicate 100% of our life next winter and the following to get us there. And I think we're going to be okay to do that.
That's amazing. I didn't realize you could lease
Oh yeah.
teams. That's really interesting. And now is the goal to use your team of dogs, or will you like, can you like sort of be like, oh, I want to get that ringer and lease them, or do you have to do it all at once? How does that work?
So we have a really core set of dogs right now. And interestingly, I just finished my doctorate in November. And Michelle, my wife, she says, okay, Robert, what's next? And I thought about it for a little bit. And I thought, man, I sure have a lot of time on my hands. So I said, let's do Iditarod. Now is the best time that we have. We have this core set of dogs, a core set of dogs, meaning in that type of race, you want a group that's anywhere from about two-ish from the time you run it to about seven or eight-ish in terms of age. So
Mhm.
we have a bunch of dogs right now that fit that bill. And of course, I may have to borrow a few dogs from my friends that are involved in this sport now. I don't know. That's 2 years from now. So
Yeah.
in any other sport, we may have to go into free agency and draft a couple of guys, if you know what I mean,
Yeah.
or go onto the trade wire or whatever to bring the guys in to be able to fulfill the team.
Wow. And how does it work in terms of a team? Like your daughter will be assisting you with this, and when the race actually happens, how does that work? Is the yeah, what just how does that work?
So I like to equate it. It's sort of like NASCAR. You have this pit crew, your team boss. They're the ones sort of doing everything other than running the dogs. And
Okay.
that was her position. She will help me feed and gear up and train and do all the things that you would do, kind of like a handler in that capacity. And then once we're on the race, you're literally pulling the hook, the snow hook out at right here, literally in our backyard in Willow, Alaska. And we're off into the wilderness for the next potentially 2 weeks,
Wow.
unassisted in terms of support from our team. But of course, you have checkpoints and things just like you would in like an Ironman or anything like that, where you would stop, pick up gear and supplies and, that sort of thing. And as you're working your way, you're plodding along at about I'm watching the trackers right now for the race at about 8 to 10 miles an hour, so not very fast, but you're making your way, and hopefully you make it there in Nome in a couple of weeks, and you're an Iditarod finisher, which is huge because more people have summited Everest than have ran Iditarod. And the Iditarod has been around since 1973. This is the 53rd running this year. So
Wow.
a lot of people have done Everest. Very few people, I think 800 or something like that, have finished Iditarod. I'm not sure exactly on that number.
I'm gonna cut that out because I feel no, it's very impressive. I just don't want Everest people to be like, haha, now a new thing I need to do. Like every
Hey,
time I
that's a
see,
good, no, that's a good point. There is a woman, she is my neighbor.
yeah,
She has this very, I don't know if you want to start over, but she has
no.
this very rare disease, something going on with her eyes that can end up be fatal, right?
Mm,
And she did Everest and did it very well. And then, of course, you know how adventurers are. She says, well, I did that. I've got to do something else. And
yeah,
she packed up, she moved to Alaska. She did lease a team from my neighbor a few years ago. And she's done Iditarod, I don't know, 3 or 4 times now. So it is a strong feat, whether you're doing both or one, either way.
yeah. Every time I see videos of Everest, I'm like disgusted. I'm like, this is so gross. Like people just waiting in line to go up the mountain, and there's
It's
like,
terrible. I mean, it's a huge accomplishment to be able
sure,
to, of human endurance to be able to do that.
sure,
Uh, I don't know if I'll ever do anything like that, but you never know.
interesting. Well, we'll have to keep watching. So look, I don't know anything about sled dogs and mushing, but other than what I've seen in like movies, right? And on TV, what's something that a regular person wouldn't understand or may have a misconception about with these dogs and with this sport?
Well, first off, I encourage you and your listeners to
Hmm.
go watch a couple of different movies. If you subscribe to Disney Plus, there's a
Hmm.
movie called Togo that
Hmm.
is about one of the most famous sled dogs out there. It's also the story of Balto is a very famous sled dog story. And that movie I mentioned back earlier, Iron Will, another Disney movie. So all of these movies have that Disneyfication, I guess, the
Hmm.
happy go lucky type story. But anyway, a thing that a lot of people get misunderstood is, of course, anytime that you're using dogs to do anything, there are people on one side or the other that think that this is wrong. And of
Hmm.
course, you have organizations that protest that, and of course, they have their right to do that. But these guys are not the golden retriever that most people have. These guys are not the Labrador. These guys are not the poodle, as I mentioned. These guys were specifically bred for this, to do this particular thing. And we talked about Togo and Balto. I have a young dog right now. Her name is Isolt. She is 3 years old. She comes from the descendants of Togo. So way back, 100 and some odd years, that's where her generation comes from. So they are building these dogs up to do this for many, many generations. And if people can think about this, any breed of dog that we have was bred to do something. For example, German Shepherds make excellent police dogs. Labradors make excellent drug detection dogs. That's what they were bred for. And fortunately, they become very good pets because they have the ability to work with us and become, pack-oriented dogs. Whereas our dogs, they don't really care necessarily. We talked about training. They don't really care if I'm on the back of the sled or not. They are just going to pull until they can pull no longer. That is
Yeah,
their. So I like to say it is their job to do what they want to do, and they are fully enjoying and embracing every bit of it.
yeah. It's that was actually a question that I had if there were any sort of like ethical concerns. And um yeah, we're obviously not talking about abuse. Yeah, and these dogs, this is what they want to do. They love doing it. It's literally, as you said, bred into them. I had the amazing opportunity to stay at a Navajo sheep ranch, and they had Pyrenees herding dogs and just beautiful, beautiful dogs. And the owner of the ranch told us, she was like, "Look, they're friendly, but they're working. Like, don't bother them when they're working." And it was so incredible. I mean, you could see it. Like they didn't want anything to do with us. They didn't want, I'm like, oh, look, puppies, and they're like, no. And it was so impressive to see it because, as you said, this is what they were born to do. I mean, it's really incredible. And the ability for dogs to flip and interact with humans and interact with us um, is, I think, such a special thing. Do you, when you're training your dogs in your pack, how does that work? Is it, I mean, I should say obviously, but I mean, are they staying in that house? Is it really a work relationship? Like, how does that go?
It's a good question. For the best way to describe it is all of our dogs are, think of Snoopy is a good analogy. They are hanging out in, we call it the dog yard, and a lot of people will not understand that, but they hang out together down the hill from us, just a couple hundred yards, and they hang out together to be together.
Hmm.
If we bring one of these guys in, they do not want to be inside. Like
Yeah.
Bodie walking around, he's been a house dog his entire life,
Yeah.
right? But if we bring these guys in, if they're sick or injured or whatever, they're pacing, they're panting, they want to be at the front door, they're ready to get the heck out of here. They don't
Yeah.
care. They're not
Yeah.
helping. So it's almost kind of like a farm situation, but not that way, right? So that's where they're at. They get a lot of interaction, of course, when we're dealing with them,
Hmm.
whether they're doing runs or free runs in the backyard or whatever. So there's a lot of human interaction. And then, of course, when we're out there on the trail, it is that symbiotic team relationship. I am sort of the quarterback, right? And then I have my team who are my position players, the wide receivers and the offensive linemen and the skill players and the Tom Brady's of the world and all of that. They're sort of making the decision. Well, actually, I'm not the quarterback. I'm the coach. The
Yeah.
quarterback are the lead dogs. They're the ones that are, they're the ones that are running the plays. I'm just the one that is, sending in the commands, if you will.
Wow. Very cool. And so you have also, and I wrote this down, you have also created a first of its kind multi-sport winter expedition course. So what inspired that? And can you tell us a little bit about that?
So I went back to college in 2014 on a dare from my daughter. She was getting out of high school. We went down for a college visit, as parents do with their high school seniors. And we were walking around UAA, University of Alaska Anchorage, and she says, "Dad, I bet that I will finish college before you if you go back." So, long story short is I ended up going to school for 3 more degrees. She never finished college. She's starting again. She's starting again in the fall as a mid-20s young lady.
Sure.
So anyway, I was in school for outdoor leadership type stuff, right? So my project, because nobody's going to hire an intern in their mid 40s to, pick up bats or something at a baseball game. So I went to my instructor and I said, "Hey, I want to do something totally off the wall. I want to design and implement this expedition for our fellow students." So he was also an outdoor adventure type leader. So we developed this program called the Winter Multi-Sport Expedition. And it was over spring break. We had sled dogs, fat tire bikes. If you're not familiar, think of a mountain bike with about 5-inch wide tires and snow machines. And we took off through the wilderness, 9 of us, and we went about 170-ish miles. And then every day, everybody would switch. So if you're on a dog team today, you may be on a fat tire bike tomorrow, and then you would be on a snow machine. And the snow machine was our support. They were pulling our gear and tents and food and all that. And then every day we would switch. So it could be, a real slugfest on the bike, or it may be this awesome experience on a dog team, or just kind of just being this support guide going down the trail with the snow machine. So we designed that, and we did that 2 years, and then COVID kind of hit, just like everything else. So at about the same time, I had finished that degree, started my master's degree at in sports management and outdoor adventure sports, and then I thought, this would be cool to offer a dog mushing course just as a intro type course. So I got a contract to teach dog mushing at UAA and Alaska Pacific University. And I still do that to this day. I think I'm the only college instructor in America that is teaching that course, which is kind of cool to hang your hat on. I really enjoy that. And that's truly, no matter all the stories we've already told, that's truly our passion is to be able to introduce college age students to this lifestyle, this sport, this adventure type stuff that we do. I love doing that, and I would not trade that for the world.
Yeah. And Dr. Forto, I should say. A doctorate is not anything to yeah, you know, ignore. It's a huge accomplishment. And what have you learned in terms of leadership from your outdoor adventure endeavors?
Probably the biggest takeaway, since I am kind of focused on kind of expedition type leadership, that's sort of how we can equate, bring a team together from kind of a sled dog perspective into the corporate environment. I have always thought that my big takeaway is if you fail to plan, you're going to plan to fail. That
Mhm.
old quote that people have, and I think that that is truly what I learned the most. And my degree is in strategic leadership, and that comes from, man, if you don't plan, if you don't have a strategy to do something, whatever that is, whether it's dog mushing or adventuring or expeditions or just getting your team in line to do XYZ, if you do not have a plan, that plan will definitely fail. And I think that's the key takeaway.
Yeah. And were you always like this? Like as a kid, were you, making up games or doing different sports and adventures? Or is this something that you sort of cultivated later in life?
I think it's pretty early on. I like to tell the story of I was maybe 10 or 11 years old, and I had a paper route. And I remember hiring the little kids, like the 7 or 8 year olds, and I would have those guys pass out the papers. And then I would go collect the money at 12 years old, right? So I was a little entrepreneur at 7 or 12 or whatever with a little 7 or 8 year old crew, right? So that's where I kind of started. And
Mhm.
then, of course, as a kid in the 80s, I had a little breakdancing school in the garage and charged a quarter for that and just had some cardboard and some boom boxes and that sort of thing. So I've always had this little entrepreneurial spirit. I have never really had a job that I've collected a paycheck from. I did work at 7-Eleven in college for a little while, and that was mainly for beer money.
Mhm.
But otherwise, it was all about figuring out a way to, you know, just do what I wanted to do and find a way to do it correctly.
That's fantastic. And you've built, rather not owned, you've, built multiple successful dog training businesses. What would you, what advice would you give dog owners in terms of properly training their puppies or their dogs? Like, what's something maybe that is common that you're like, I wish people didn't do that, or just something that you wish people knew?
Like we said earlier, I think a lot of people are kind of pigeonholing their relationship with their dogs. They think that their dog is very well behaved at home, and usually they are.
Mhm.
The dog will sit and watch the Monday night football game at your feet or whatever. you're doing. But then once you take them out into the world, just like with kids or anything else, they tend to get in trouble. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of that comes from not having a good, solid relationship with your dog. And that means, hey, when we are doing something, whatever that is, we have to be able to work together to make it through this process, whether it be hanging out with other dogs or going to the farmer's market or when grandma comes over, you're not jumping on her at Thanksgiving and that sort of thing. You have to have that relationship built with your dog. I think so many people today like the novelty of having a dog, but they don't necessarily want to do the work to put in to make that relationship successful.
Yeah. Yeah. I have two cats who I love and I love dogs, but my life right now cannot support a dog. I mean it can't. And it's that time commitment like you said and that relationship building whereas love my cats, we have a strong relationship, but if I leave for like 2 days, they're fine. Like they're
They're their own animal. I mean, I think if the world ended today, cats would be okay.
they'd be fine. Yeah. Yeah, they'd be like, "Oh, this is fine." I know sometimes now my cats are very affectionate, but I did have one years ago that like if I was gone for a week or something, I'd come home and the cat was like, "Oh, you were gone?" Like just no, like just totally different. Um, Now, so how has your approach to leadership or your thoughts on leadership changed, since 1994? What are some of the um, maybe moments that have influenced you, or just as you've evolved, like how have you shifted your perspective or evolved your perspective on leadership?
That's a great question. As I mentioned at the top, I was a kid of a military family. My dad was a Marine, a major in the Marine Corps,
Wow.
and we did the things like a Marine family does. I mean, we had literal, and this is the 1980s, so we had literal room inspections on Saturday morning and that sort of thing. I mean, it was hardcore, do as I do, do as I say type stuff. So my early leadership was built upon that sort of authoritarian type leadership, meaning you have this consummate leader at the top, whoever that is, whether it's dad or CEO or whatever, and then you have everybody else sort of funneling down on the team. And I learned very quickly, especially entering in the college environment the second time as a much older student, you can't lead like that anymore. You cannot be this authoritarian type leader. Servant leadership is much, much different. Agency type leadership is much, much different. Your teams respond much better, I have learned, than if you are this sort of dictator at the top. If you have this sort of collaborative type of experience, you can go a heck of a longer way with your team if you have something like that.
Yeah. And how do you recommend to leaders, that servant leadership is so important, having more of an inclusive environment where people's thoughts and voices are heard. And sometimes I think most people feel have been in this situation where you don't need the agreement of the group, right? Like the decision has to get made and you're the leader and you have to make it. What advice do you give leaders in those situations when they may know it's a difficult situation and it may be something that they can't bring everybody in on in terms of the team, before the decision comes out? What's some advice that you would give someone for that?
That's another awesome question, and I think groupthink is definitely a real thing in teams, especially when the going gets tough. Whatever happens, happens. And I could talk about things getting really tough on expeditions where groupthink really caused issues. But in today's world, there are there are teams that thrive on that sort of collaborative type of experience, but there has to be somebody that takes the lead, and especially in outdoor leadership programs like Knowles or Outward Bound or things like that. They have a very collaborative approach to leadership, especially with young folks. But there's always a leader of the day, and you're getting the advice of your team, you're taking it under consideration, you're taking it under advisement, and then you're sort of taking all of that data in and then making a decision that is best for the team. So the team can say, "Yep, I think we should do XYZ," and the other team may say agree or disagree, but somebody has to be the one. I mean, I think that that's true leadership is somebody has to be the one that says, "We are going to plod this path, whatever path that is, and I hope that you will take this adventure, this trip, this meeting, whatever it is with me, because I think it's going to come out in the end where everything's is successful."
Yeah. Can you talk about an expedition where that group think went the wrong direction?
100%. A couple of years ago, we were doing an expedition, a Serum Run expedition from Nenana to Nome, Alaska. I was on a snow machine, and we were on the middle of the Yukon River at about negative 50 degrees below zero. So very cold. Our snow machines had been getting stuck in what is called overflow, and overflow is where uh, the ice melts enough on the river where it produces. So you have snow, then you have water, then you have ice.
Okay.
Much deeper ice. I mean, it could be several feet thick, but that overflow water can really get in trouble. So we were constantly getting stuck in this overflow so much that we were all just drenched up to here, up to our shoulders in
Yeah.
in water. So we all pulled into the next checkpoint, and we were talking about should we continue? We're really struggling. Several of us had quit and said, I'm done, and we all got together, and that's where groupthink really came in. And it was really influenced by a couple of stronger voices in the group, if you will. They were trying to prod and prod and say, oh, if we don't do this, we're not going to make it, or we've paid this much money to do this, or whatever. Common, common think on expeditions, especially when there's an end goal, there's a start and a finish. So many people have their eyes set that a expedition or event or a race or whatever is not successful unless you make it to the finish. So yeah, it was a very interesting situation. I ended up pulling out of that race at that checkpoint. I went home, even though I was the trip leader. I said, "Hey, not only is my snow machine frozen solid as an ice cube, but I cannot continue. I don't think it's appropriate for this team." And they went on to do it, and finished relatively well. It happened to be right before the COVID pandemic shutdown, like 2 or 3 days earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, thankfully they got in before the world shut down and everybody got out. They were in Nome, Alaska, so everybody got out okay. But groupthink is a big thing, and if you equate that to expeditions or even your small, 5-member team of a business, it can really cause issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've been podcasting. Actually, let me ask a different question before I ask you about podcasting. How do other countries and even cultures approach dog sledding? Like, is it a similar mentality? Does the United States or Alaska even have a different approach to it? Or how historically, what's been the approach and maybe what has been the evolution of that?
Well, it's very popular in Europe. We're going to talk about my podcast in a second, but
Yeah.
more than half of our podcast listeners are from Europe. So
Hmm.
that's a huge audience over there. It's been going on forever, especially in the northern countries, of course. That's dog sledding. They've used it for transportation and, all of that for many
Sure.
years. Racing is relatively new, very popular in Central Europe. So I think Germany, Switzerland, Italy, that sort of thing. Interestingly enough, in our nightly podcast that we do right now, covering the Iditarod, we have a group of students from Kenya that is following us. I mean, they are full bore, 100% on board with this. I want to learn everything I can about this race. So just a small little classroom in Kenya,
Sure.
Africa is learning. This sport is very popular in Australia and New Zealand. Almost all of that is dryland racing, but it is sort of a worldwide thing. It's very niche.
Hmm.
I know we talked offline about fencing.
Hmm.
You'll never hear about fencing if you're watching the Olympics every 4 years.
Right.
So sort of the same thing with dog mushing. Unless you are kind of in the group, if you will, you probably don't know much about it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And is it sort of a similar approach regardless of where you are, or do different countries have sort of a different approach to training and working with the dogs and things of that nature?
The folks in Northern Europe, mainly in Sweden and Norway, it is almost an Olympic type training. I mean, they
Mm.
have everybody wears these fancy uniforms, and they have the sponsorships and the hoorah of the nation type thing, right? Whereas us, we're just sort of a bunch of kind of you know play it till you make it type deals, kind of bootstraps type deal. None of us have any real money, so to speak.
Yeah.
We're doing this as self-funded, whereas those guys in Northern Europe in particular, they got it going on. They're doing pretty good over there.
Interesting. Very interesting. So, as I started to say, you have been podcasting since I think it's 2009. And so a very long time. How have you seen that change? And I was going to ask about your audience and, who's listening and where. And I think you actually maybe answered it, like the most surprising place of who's listening.
So I have been podcasting since January of 2009, and we have never missed a week on our dog training podcast. It's called Dogworks Radio. So every week since however many weeks January of 2009 is, a lot of weeks, right?
That's
So we,
amazing.
yeah,
That's amazing.
that's huge.
Yeah,
Of course, a lot of those were, batch recordings, like if we're
it's
going on
okay.
the whatever. But hey, you know how it is.
Yeah.
Uh, So we've done that for a very long time. We use that primarily as our marketing engine for our dog training because we're here in Alaska, but we do a lot of work outside, as they say here in Alaska, with service dogs and that sort of thing. So we've been doing that for a long time. We've been doing a dog mushing podcast for almost as long. We do a nightly podcast for the Iditarod, which we've talked a lot about. We're doing that right now at the time of recording. That's where a huge number of our audience comes from in terms of the dog mushing audience. That's
Mhm.
truly worldwide. But I spoke a couple of years ago at Podcast Movement. It is the largest podcast conference in the country. It's huge, right?
Mhm.
I spoke there, and my topic was it took me 8 years to get my first million downloads. And that's podcasting in a nutshell. A lot of people just have to just sort of plug away, plug away, plug away. And then when you finally reach that milestone, which so many of us want, that million download milestone. Once you get there, I mean, it's celebratory for a minute or two, and then you plug away.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that once you get there, things start happening. Of course, monetization comes in, and followers are easier to attract, and all of that sort of stuff. But it's a difficult deal because even today, I hear every day people say, well, what the heck is a podcast? Why do you do that? Why aren't you on YouTube? Or, why aren't you doing lives or reels or whatever? Well, we've been talking for 47 minutes, and you're not going to get these kind of stories from a reel. You only get it on a podcast. And I think that's what's effective. I'm sure
Yeah.
that's why you do it. It's truly a medium where you have the full attention of people in their ears, whether they're driving or running sled dogs or mowing the lawn or cooking dinner or whatever. Typically, a podcast is immersive. And I don't think in today's crazy busy world, I mean, you can watch a YouTube video while you're reading the newspaper or doing your homework or whatever. It's tough to do that with a podcast
Yeah. Did you listen to the radio as a kid?
all the time.
Like,
I had this, I had the old clock radio next to my bed and, was listening to, I mean, I was a nerd, so I was listening to AM radio at 10 and, that sort of thing. But yeah, I've always been kind of a talk radio kind of junkie. I mean, I
yeah.
love that kind of stuff because those are the stories, right? I mean, I used to love Larry King back in the day. And there was a guy, what's his name? Steve Harvey, the guy that used to say, and this is the rest of the story.
I think
Uh,
it was Dave Harvey. Yeah, but I know who you're talking about.
he had this way. I mean, of course, that's how they did it in the 30s and 40s. People would sit around their radios and just kind of be entranced with these
Yeah.
stories. And I think it's such a cool way to do things.
Yeah, I agree. And I love, and now I listen to them on podcasts, but I loved listening to NPR on the weekends. And there was, Lake Wobegon and then, game shows and things of that nature. And I agree with you that it's so much more immersive. And you also own Mushing magazine. So you're in like the multimedia space. What is your vision for the magazine as you move forward?
So we bought the magazine last year in June, 2 years ago, June. So it'll be 2 years here coming up. And interestingly enough, the previous publishers, they live in Nome. They publish the oldest newspaper in Alaska called the Nome Nugget, Diana and Nils. And I had no idea that it was available. And they called me up out of the blue one day and said, hey, are you guys interested in purchasing Mushing Magazine? And I am a firm believer that a business deal happens in person.
Hmm.
So we flew up to Nome and sat in their little newsroom, if you will, which is literally just a little building in the middle of nowhere, Nome, Alaska. And he said to me, Robert, the reason we want to sell this to you is because I've listened to every episode of your podcast. And I thought, oh my goodness, man, that's something, right? So we made a deal. I had no idea how difficult it is to publish a magazine.
Yeah.
We are still learning trial by fire. I mean, it is a tough hoe to haul to do that. Number one reason is in podcasting, you can make mistakes and be okay with it. If
Yeah.
you make a mistake in a printed magazine, if you misspell somebody's name or get a fact wrong, boy, you hear about it
Yeah.
because it's in print.
Right.
So no, that's sort of the deal. But I think on our Twitter profile or X or whatever it's called right now, it says something to the effect under the bio like we are a small media empire in the wilds of Alaska or something like that. Our goal with the magazine is to really chronicle the written history of dog mushing, at least in the United States, from about 1960s till present. And we could I mean that's another episode we could
Yeah.
talk about. But nobody has read a lot of this information that we have, and we're putting it on the website mushing.com. That was a huge reason why we bought it, because if you know anything about SEO as a listener, you know if you're typing in how is the dog mushing race going today? Guess what? They're going to find us because that word mushing is there. So I mean, it's like having radio in your domain name or something if you have a radio channel. So that is our vision of that. We're still publishing 4 printed issues a year when it's probably not cost effective to do that because it's so expensive to print and mail and all of that. But we love it. You know, it's our audience. We can
Yeah.
tell our stories not only on audio but now on written and get amazing photos from our friends who are taking photos that I could never capture. And it's just a cool way to kind of keep the tradition.
You are really, you're not only a leader in the space, but you're also preserving and giving provenance to the sport. That's really amazing. By the
That's
way,
our
it's 832 episodes at a minimum. That's a lot.
I know if you look on Libsyn or whatever we're using right now, it's definitely over 1,000. But
Yeah.
we've done some special editions and all that kind of stuff. But
That's
yeah, that's a
amazing.
it's
That's
awesome. It's an awesome experience. I have no idea how long that can go on. I mean, we might say tomorrow, we're never doing it again, you
sure.
know, and just sort of turn it off. And that's sort of the nature of being an entrepreneur or being self-employed. You can literally turn the lights off tomorrow if you want to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what's the most Alaska thing that you've ever done?
Oh man. I've done a lot of stuff. I already told you the story about the Northern Lights, the dogs.
Yeah.
One of the coolest things that we ever did, and we're doing it again with our sled dog Jeep for our YouTube channel, is we are driving up the Hall Road. And if you know anything about ice road truckers on TV, that is that road. It's about 1,200 miles maybe from Fairbanks to the top of the world. And we're going to drive up there on Memorial Day weekend for the content. And it's all about the content if you're,
Hmm.
a content creator. But I think that's one of the coolest things because you can drive literally to the top of the world, dip your toes into the Arctic Ocean, have a little bit of native delicacies, if you will, whale and seal and that sort of thing, if that is your fancy, and then turn right around, drive home, and within a day or so, you're back in the hustle and bustle of daily life. So I think that that's cool, where you can truly escape in Alaska in an hour. You can be in the middle of nowhere, and cell phones don't work nowadays. With Starlink, I guess you could do everything, but cell phones don't work, and you can leave your troubles behind, and that's tough to do in today's world.
Yeah, it's nice when cell phones don't work. It's like, this is great. What is the relationship with the indigenous community or communities?
With dog mushing,
Yes, sorry, yes.
I think it's very strong, and races like Iditarod, they really pay homage to that because we are coming in their communities and providing this uh, week or two of interaction. Of course, there's a lot of money and things that come
Hmm.
in with that, so that is still very strong. I'm not sure what it's like in other parts of the country or
Hmm.
the world. If anytime you have land access issues and all that sort of thing, it can be troublesome.
Hmm.
But at least up here, it's pretty vibrant.
That's great. That's wonderful. And is there anything that we haven't talked about that you wanted to make sure listeners heard?
I could probably talk forever. No, I think we are good. Of course, I would love for people to reach out and ask questions and
Yeah, of course. I do have one more question before I ask my 3 questions. Is there, because you are such an entrepreneur, you're such an adventurer. Um, is there any sort of thrill-seeking adventure type thing that you want to do that no one would expect? Like, you mentioned skydiving, but is there something that you're like, oh, that would be so cool to try and to do?
Well, I would love a good friend of mine, good friend of ours, is I did a rod finisher several times. They are twins. They're called the Barrington twins.
Mhm.
Both sisters run Iditarod, right? So every year you typically see the sisters out there on the race together. Well, last year, one of the sisters and her husband rode a tandem bike all the way across the country, and they did it in decent time. I
Well,
would love to do that. I don't know if I have the time to do that, but that would be a cool adventure just to sort of jump on a bike and ride from Oregon or wherever they started. They ended up finishing in Virginia, and I think that
wow.
there's an entirely established little deal where you can look on these special little groups and that sort of thing, and people will put you up in their houses or churches or whatever they do. I think that would be a cool adventure, but I would imagine that would take a long time to do.
Yeah.
Yep.
But definitely endurance for sure. I mean, that's incredible. Well, wonderful. So, what advice, knowing everything that you know now, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Well, I think it was key what I told you earlier
Mhm.
about really being able to shift leadership. I think that's a real takeaway. And I think second is that's a question that you could definitely ponder. I think probably um, would have a better relationship with my father. I
Mm.
think would be something I would learn. And of course, that goes both ways. I talked about my dad being in the Marine Corps. That was my stepdad. But my birth father, he left when I was young, right? And it took many, many years for us to rekindle that relationship. And it's just now happening. And man, all of the time that we lost together, I think was probably mutually an issue. You know
Mhm.
how it is. As a teenager, you say, screw you, dad, or whatever you say. And here you are. I'm in my mid 50s now, and he's in his mid to late 70s. I wish I would have thought to myself, that is important. And I think it is. And I
Yeah.
think he realizes that now as well, because now we text on Christmas and send each other Amazon gift cards and the stuff that we do in 2025.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And what do you love most about what you do?
As I said, I really, really love teaching people about what we do. I think that is our true passion, is just this is why we do this. This is how we do this. Thank you for taking the time to let us show you how to do this. And we've developed so many cool leaders from that. And just very quickly with that, all of these classes that we taught, in particular that multi-sport expedition at UAA, we will post pictures. And now these dogs are much, much older, like Bodie, who's walking around. And they will see pictures of these guys all of these years later, and they'll say, "Hey, is that Bodie? Hey, is that Wallace? Is that Gromit? Is that Skeelig? Whoever." They know the dogs and they know the dogs' names. I mean, like 7 or 8 or 9 years ago. I think we did that in 2017. So 7 years ago, 8 years ago. And they still recognize that. And they're still interacting with us on Instagram and things like that. And that is so cool to be able to have that little bit of legacy, or at least that life-changing moment for these guys. I think that's truly cool.
Yeah. It's it, you're changing people's lives. You are helping them learn and grow and develop. And many years later to see that connection, that's really special. That's really, really neat. Is there any rhyme or reason to naming your dogs? Do you have any sort of formula?
Yes, we have crews, because otherwise you will forget dogs' names. Just doing a presentation at an elementary school today, and that's always the question the kids ask is, do you know all of their names? We name all of our dogs in crews. So we have a rock and roller crew. They are one of our youngest crews. So we have Sully, Grohl, Jagger, Jazz, Cobain, uh, Hendrix, all named after something music, right? And then we have a brand new crew, hopefully my last litter ever, because the way you see it is, these guys are going to live to 14, 15, 16 years old. I will be dang near 70 at that point. So we have our brand new pups. They are just under 6 months. They are the monster crew. They were born right around Halloween. So we have Jekyll, Hyde, Pazuzu, Salem. I'm probably forgetting. See, you forget them.
Yeah.
I'm looking right at
They're
them.
new. They're new.
Yeah, Kruger. Yes, Kruger is there as well. So could not forget the Freddy Krueger reference. Remember, my first dog was named Axel, so I really have a lot of pop culture references to things I do. But yeah, I think it's cool. And the rhyme or reason to it is, and this is what I told the kids yesterday, is we have never named the dog the same name twice because that dog can never live up to the next dog. So we will never have another Bodie. We will never have another Sydney. We will never have another Frosty. All of those, a lot of those dogs have passed,
Mhm.
and we still tell stories about those guys. And I don't want to have the reverence of the stories that we tell about an amazing leader that we had named Sydney, who did some awesome stuff, and then say, "Oh, well, this is Sydney 2, right?
Mhm.
Or Sydney 3." And it's tough to fill those shoes, whether you're a dog or a person.
Yeah. And uh, what what's an example of amazing leadership for, as you just mentioned, in a dog, like in a lead dog? Like what would be something that you're like, wow.
Well, Sydney is a great example. We were doing a race called the Tustamina 200. I signed up for that race. I was really young in Alaska at the time. I think we'd only been here a year or so. And they said, "Oh, this is going to be a relatively easy race. It's called the Caribou Hills." Well, the Caribou Hills turned out to be like 10,000 foot mountains, something like that. So I really got bit off more than I could chew. So I was exhausted, sleep deprivation, the whole 9 yards. The team was just shutting down. They were done, right? So I knew Sydney could do her job. And I remember I was really struggling. And taking that football analogy, you're putting in the third string quarterback and, doing everything to try to get the play ran. And I remember just hooking her up in single lead, which is relatively uncommon today. So, meaning the only dog out front. And I hooked her up there and I just started walking. I just got in front of the sled and started walking up this mountain above the tree line in the middle of the night. And we just kept walking and walking and walking. And before long, she just caught up to me and ran past me with the team. And somehow or another, I jumped on the sled and we went on down the other side of the mountain. And she was awesome. She stepped up into the role of leader, if you will, at a time where we needed it the most. And at that point, we were probably, there's a old saying, you're going to be dead on the mountain. I mean, I don't think that would happen, but that's what it felt like when you're in the
Yeah.
middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night on a race, and you got to get to checkpoint B. You've got to pull all the stops out, and that's what she did for us that day. And that's why there can be never another Sydney.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. That's really an amazing story. And how can people find you?
I am easily found. Just my name everywhere. Robert Forto. That is Forto. I think I'm on all the socials. Definitely have our own website under that as well. Or if you're inclined to look at us from the dog mushing perspective, very easy there. Mushing.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for taking so much time for educating myself. And I think listeners probably learned a lot today. This has been a really unique and fun experience. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.